The classroom on Station Harmony was unlike anything found on Earth. The walls glowed with a soft blue light, and the seats adjusted themselves to fit whoever sat in them. Students from 12 different worlds filled the room, each one looking completely different from the next. Taesung sat near the back, his simple human appearance making him almost invisible among the more exotic students. Next to him, Ji-won was drawing something in her notebook, probably not paying attention to the lesson that was about to start. 2 rows ahead, Hyunwoo sat perfectly still, his dark eyes watching everything with quiet interest. The 3 humans were exchange students at the Interstellar Academy, part of Earth's new program to learn from the wider galaxy. They had been here for 3 months now, and most of their classes were interesting but not too difficult. Today was their first day in advanced survival skills. Instructor Velmar entered the room through a door that seemed to appear from nowhere. He was a Kitresh, which meant he looked like a giant mantis covered in dark green armor. His multiple eyes scanned the classroom, and his triangular head tilted as he counted his students. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that made him sound calm and professional. "Welcome to Advanced Survival Skills," Velmar said, his mandibles clicking softly. "This class will teach you how to stay alive in dangerous situations. Some of you come from peaceful worlds. Some of you come from worlds with natural dangers. But all of you need to know how to survive." Taesung leaned forward, interested. He had always liked camping back on Earth, and he figured this class would be similar to the wilderness survival courses he had taken in school. Around the room, the other students shifted in their seats. There was Dax, a Quellan with 4 powerful arms and gray skin that looked like stone. Despite his size, Dax was actually quite nervous, and he often jumped at loud noises. Near the front sat Pip, a small Fenrir who looked like a rabbit standing on 2 legs. Pip's large ears twitched constantly, listening for any sign of danger. "Today," Velmar continued, "we will discuss the most important survival skill of all, how to flee from an apex predator." The room became very quiet. Even the usual whispers and small movements stopped. Taesung noticed that Pip's ears had folded back against his head, and Dax's 4 hands were gripping his desk tightly. Velmar walked to the center of the room, where a holographic projector sat waiting. An apex predator is the most dangerous creature on any world. They sit at the top of the food chain. Nothing hunts them. They hunt everything else. If you encounter an apex predator, your only goal is to escape with your life. Ji-won stopped drawing and looked up. Taesung saw her eyebrows raise slightly, the way they always did when she found something interesting. "The key to survival," Velmar said, his voice serious, "is to understand that you cannot fight an apex predator. You cannot reason with it. You cannot negotiate. You can only run, hide, or use your species' natural advantages to escape." Taesung raised his hand. Velmar's multiple eyes focused on him. "Yes, Taesung." "Which kind?" Taesung asked. The classroom became even quieter, if that was possible. Several students turned to look at the human with expressions that ranged from confusion to concern. Velmar's head tilted the other way. "I do not understand your question." "Which kind of apex predator?" Taesung said, speaking slowly in case there was a translation problem. "There are different kinds, right? So the way you run would be different depending on which kind is chasing you." The instructor's mandibles opened and closed several times. We will cover several examples. Perhaps you misunderstood the question format." "Oh," Taesung said, sitting back. "Okay, I just wanted to make sure we would go over different types. Because the strategies would be really different." Velmar stared at him for a moment longer, then turned back to the holographic projector. "Yes, we will examine multiple examples. Let us begin." The lights in the room dimmed and a 3-dimensional image appeared in the center of the classroom. It showed a creature that looked like a massive lizard covered in black armor plates. It stood on 4 legs, each one ending in claws as long as Taesung's forearm. The creature's mouth was filled with teeth and a ridge of spikes ran down its back. "This is a Rakthari," Velmar said. "It comes from the world of Rakthos Prime. It can grow up to 8 feet tall at the shoulder and weighs approximately 600 pounds. Its armor plating can stop most natural weapons, and its claws contain a venom that causes paralysis." Pip made a small squeaking sound and seemed to shrink in his seat. "The Rakthari hunts by ambush," Velmar continued. "It waits near water sources or game trails, then strikes when prey comes near. Its initial charge can reach speeds of 40 miles per hour. Does it hunt alone or in groups? Tae-sung asked without raising his hand this time. Velmar paused. Alone. Adult Rakthari are solitary hunters. What about its senses? Ji-won added, now fully paying attention. How does it track prey? The instructor's antennae twitched with what might have been irritation, primarily by smell and vibration. Its eyesight is poor in bright light. Hyunwoo spoke up, his quiet voice somehow carrying through the room. How large is its hunting territory? Velmar turned to look at all three humans. Around them, the other students were shifting uncomfortably. Dax had moved his desk slightly away from Tae-sung. These are very specific questions, Velmar said slowly. The purpose of this lesson is to teach you how to escape, not to study the predator in detail. But you need to know details to escape properly, Tae-sung said, sounding genuinely confused about why this was even a question. If it hunts alone, you don't need to worry about being surrounded. If it tracks by smell, you need to cross water. If it has a territory, you just need to get out of that area. The holographic Rakthari rotated slowly in the air, its teeth gleaming in the blue light. Velmar's multiple eyes studied the three humans with an intensity that made some of the other students nervous. Your approach to this subject is unusual, the instructor said carefully. Most students want to know the fastest way to run. You want to know how the predator thinks? Well, yeah, Ji-won said, as if this was obvious. You can't outrun something if you don't understand what it's doing. Back home, we have lots of predators. Bears, mountain lions, wolves. You survive them by knowing their behavior. Had. Hyunwoo corrected quietly. We had lots of predators. Right, had, Ji-won agreed. Most of them are in protected areas now. Velmar's mandibles clicked rapidly, which the humans had learned meant he was thinking hard about something. We will continue with the lesson. Please hold your questions until the end. But Tae-sung noticed that several students were no longer looking at the holographic predator. They were looking at the humans, and their expressions were uncertain, even afraid. He wondered what he had said wrong. The lesson continued, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. Something had shifted when Tae-sung asked his simple question. The other students seemed to see the three humans differently now, though Tae-sung could not figure out why. In the soft blue light of the classroom, surrounded by aliens from a dozen worlds, the three humans watched and learned, not realizing that they were teaching a lesson of their own. Velmar moved to the next holographic display, though his movement seemed less confident than before. The image shifted, showing a new creature that made several students gasp. This one was sleek and dark, almost invisible against a black background. It had 6 legs and a body that seemed to bend in ways that should not be possible. This is a shadow maw, the instructor said, native to the twilight forests of Umbral 3. They hunt in packs of 5 to 7 individuals. Their primary weapon is an electromagnetic pulse that they generate naturally, which paralyzes their prey's nervous system. Tae-sung leaned forward again, his eyes bright with interest. How long does the paralysis last? Between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, depending on the prey's size, Velmar answered, then seemed to regret doing so. And what's the range on the pulse? Ji-won asked, her pen moving across her notebook now. Approximately 15 feet. Hyunwoo was typing something on his datapad. Do they have a pack hierarchy? Alpha structure? Velmar's antenna drooped slightly. Yes, the largest female leads the pack. So if you could identify and avoid the female, the others might not pursue as aggressively, Tae-sung said, nodding to himself. That's useful. Around the classroom, the other students were having quiet conversations. Dax leaned toward a reptilian student named Cress and whispered something. Cress's forked tongue flicked out nervously as he glanced at the humans. Pip had pulled his small body into a tight ball on his chair, his long ears flat against his back. His large eyes darted between Velmar and the 3 humans, as if he could not decide which one worried him more. The recommended escape protocol for a Shadow Maw encounter, Velmar said, speaking louder to regain control of the class, is to immediately climb to higher ground. Shadow Maws cannot climb vertical surfaces. If climbing is not possible, enter water deeper than 3 feet. They avoid water because it disperses their electromagnetic pulse. What about their sense of smell? Tae-sung asked. If you're hiding, can they track you by scent? Why do you need to know about tracking? A voice said from the middle of the room. It was Cress, the reptilian student. The instructor said to climb or enter water. Why do you want to know how they hunt? Tae-sung turned to look at him, confused. Because sometimes you can't climb and there's no water, You need backup plans. Backup plans for running away? Cress's scales rippled with an emotion the humans had not learned to read yet. You talk like you are planning to hunt them. What? No, Taesung said, laughing a little. I'm trying to understand how to avoid them. That's the whole point of the class, right? But Cress did not look convinced, and neither did several other students. Velmar cleared his throat, though he did not have a throat in the biological sense. Let us continue. The next apex predator is perhaps the most dangerous in known space. The hologram changed again. This time it showed a creature that looked like a serpent but wrong. Its body was segmented like an insect, and it had no eyes at all. Instead, its head was covered in thousands of small holes. The creature was massive, easily 60 feet long in the image, though Velmar explained it could grow much larger. The void serpent, the instructor said quietly. It lives in the empty spaces between star systems. It can survive in the vacuum of space and often attacks small ships. Its body can breach standard hull plating, and it hunts by sensing electromagnetic signatures and heat. For the first time, the three humans were silent for almost 10 seconds. Then Jiwon spoke. How fast can it move in space? Velmar seemed relieved by the question, as if he had expected something worse. Unknown. They have been clocked at speeds up to 0.2 light speed, but some xenobiologists believe they can move faster. What do they eat? Hyunwoo asked. If they're in space, there's no normal food chain. They consume metal and organic matter. Some scientists believe they feed on the energy from stars, but this is not confirmed. Taesung was staring at the hologram with intense focus. Has anyone ever survived a direct encounter with one? Like up close? Only 3 recorded cases, Velmar said. In all 3 instances, the survivors were inside heavily armored military vessels. No one has survived an encounter in a civilian ship or while spacewalking. But 3 people did survive, Jiwon said. So it is possible. What did they do? What worked? The instructor's mandibles clicked rapidly. I do not have those details in this lesson plan. However, the point is that void serpents are to be avoided at all costs. If you detect one on sensors, you must immediately change course and inform the authorities. Right, but if you can't change course, Taesung pressed, like if your engines are damaged or something. What then? There must be some kind of protocol. Velmar was quiet for a moment. The holographic void serpent twisted in the air above them, its eyeless head seeming to look at each student in turn. There is no protocol, the instructor finally said. If you cannot escape, you die. That is the reality of apex predators. They are called apex for a reason. They are the end of the food chain. Nothing survives them unless the predator chooses to let them go. Everything has a weakness, Hyunwoo said softly, but his voice carried through the silent classroom. Even apex predators. They have to have some vulnerability, or they would have consumed all available prey and starved. Velmar turned to face the quiet human student. What did you say? Balance, Hyunwoo explained, looking up from his datapad. Ecosystems require balance. If an apex predator is too successful, it destroys its own food source, so there must be limiting factors. Population controls, weaknesses. The instructor took a step back. Around the room, students were staring at Hyunwoo with expressions that the humans still could not fully interpret. You think about predators the way a scientist thinks about them, Velmar said slowly. Analytically, objectively, without fear. Should we be afraid? Jiwon asked, genuinely curious. I mean, we're in a classroom. We're learning about these things so we can avoid them, right? Fear doesn't help with learning. Pip suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His small body was shaking and his eyes were too wide. May I be excused? He squeaked. I do not feel well. Velmar gestured toward the door. Of course. Go to the medical bay if needed. The small Fenrir hurried out of the room, his long feet barely making any sound. As the door closed behind him, Velmar turned back to the class. Perhaps we should take a short break. When we return, we will discuss practical escape scenarios. The students began to file out of the classroom in small groups. The humans noticed that their classmates were avoiding them now, giving them extra space as they walked past. Dax, who usually joked around with Taesung before class, left without making eye contact. The 3 humans found themselves alone near their desks as the room emptied. Did I say something wrong? Taesung asked his friends, confused. Jiwon shook her head. I don't think so. We were just asking questions. They seemed upset, Hyunwoo observed, especially when we asked about predator behavior and weaknesses. Maybe their species are prey animals? Taesung suggested. Like Pip definitely acts like a rabbit. He gets scared easily. Possibly, Jiwon said, but even Dax seemed uncomfortable and he's huge. He could probably fight off most things. They walked out into the corridor where other students were gathered in small groups. The conversation stopped when the humans appeared, then resumed in quieter tones after they passed. Velmar stood near a large window that looked out at the stars, his body very still. When he noticed the three humans, he turned to face them. "May I ask you something?" the instructor said. "Sure," Taesung replied. "On your world Earth, you mentioned having apex predators. How do your people respond when they encounter one?" The three humans looked at each other. "Well," Jiwon said, "it depends on the predator. Different animals need different responses. But generally," Taesung added, "you try to make yourself look bigger, back away slowly, and avoid sudden movements. For most predators, anyway." "And if that does not work?" Velmar asked. "Then you fight," Hyunwoo said simply. "You go for the eyes, the nose, anywhere sensitive. You make yourself too difficult to be worth hunting." Velmar's antennae trembled. "You fight apex predators." As a last resort, Jiwon clarified. "Usually they leave you alone if you follow the right protocols." The instructor looked at them for a long moment, his multiple eyes reflecting the light from the stars outside. "I see," he said quietly. "We will resume class in 10 minutes. As Velmar walked away, the three humans stood by the window, watching the galaxy turn slowly in the darkness beyond the station. None of them understood why their classmates looked at them with such strange expressions. None of them realized that they had revealed something fundamental about humanity that the galaxy was not ready to see. Velmar dismissed the class early. The students left quickly, talking in low voices, casting glances at the three humans who remained behind at the instructor's request. Taesung, Jiwon, and Hyunwoo stood together near the windows, unsure why they had been asked to stay. They had not done anything wrong as far as they could tell. They had completed the simulation just like everyone else. "Am I in trouble?" Taesung asked when Velmar approached them. "No," the instructor said, though his tone suggested something more complex than simple approval or disapproval. "But I must speak with my colleagues. Please wait here." He left through a side door, leaving the three humans alone in the empty classroom. "This is weird," Jiwon said, sitting on the edge of a desk. "We just did what made sense. Why is everyone acting so strange? Maybe their species don't have the same predators we do?" Hyunwoo suggested. "Maybe they come from worlds where the apex predators are so dangerous that fighting back or using tactics doesn't work." "Maybe," Taesung agreed. "But that seems unlikely. Every planet with life should have some kind of predator-prey balance." They waited for almost 30 minutes. Through the classroom windows, they could see other students passing by in the corridors, and some of them stopped to look inside, pointing at the humans before moving on. Finally, the door opened. But it was not just Velmar who entered. With him came three other instructors, and behind them, a figure that made even the professors seem small. The headmaster of the Interstellar Academy was a being unlike any the humans had seen before. It looked like a massive crystal formation that had learned to move, its body made of geometric shapes that reflected light in impossible ways. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "Students of Earth," the headmaster said, and the room resonated with the sound. "Please sit. We have questions for you." The three humans sat down, feeling suddenly very much like they were in trouble after all, even though no one had said so. Velmar stood to the side along with the other instructors. One of them was a bird-like avicine with brilliant blue feathers. Another was a being that looked like a cloud of glowing particles that held a vaguely humanoid shape. The third was a massive creature covered in thick fur like a bear standing upright. "We have reviewed the recordings of your simulation performance," the headmaster began, "and we have some concerns. Not about your behavior exactly, but about what it reveals." "We did something wrong?" Jiwon asked. "No," the crystalline being said. "You did something different. And difference when it comes to survival instincts can be illuminating. Tell me, what predators exist on Earth?" The three humans looked at each other. Lots," Taesung said. "Bears, mountain lions, wolves, tigers, leopards, jaguars, crocodiles, alligators, sharks," Jiwon added. "Snakes, some of them venomous," Hyunwoo continued. "Eagles and hawks for smaller prey. Orcas in the ocean. Polar bears in the Arctic. And do humans have specific protocols for encountering each of these? The Avicene instructor asked, her feathers ruffling. Yes, Jiwan said. They're all different. For bears, you make yourself look big and back away slowly. Unless it's a black bear that's being aggressive, then you fight back. For mountain lions, you maintain eye contact and don't run. For sharks, you hit the nose or gills if attacked. For crocodiles, wait, the bear-like instructor interrupted. You fight them? You fight apex predators? Only if we have to, Taesung said. Usually they leave humans alone if you follow the right procedures. Most predators don't want to waste energy on prey that fights back. The headmaster's crystalline body shifted, light refracting through it in patterns that might have indicated thought. How long has humanity coexisted with these apex predators? Forever? Hyunwoo said. I mean, they were around before we were. We evolved alongside them. And how do you survive? Velmar asked quietly. Humans are not particularly strong or fast. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. How did your species survive in an environment full of apex predators? The three humans thought about this. We're smart, Jiwan said. And we work together. Humans are really good at cooperation. And we make tools, Taesung added. Spears, traps, fire. We learned how to use our environment. But that was ancient times, Hyunwoo said. Now most of the big predators are in protected areas. They're endangered. The room became very quiet. Endangered? The glowing particle instructor said, its voice vibrating strangely. The apex predators of your world are endangered? Most of them, yes, Jiwon said. Tigers, lions, wolves, bears, they're all protected now. Humans hunted them too much and their populations got really small. So we made laws to protect them and created reserves where they can live safely. You hunted them, the headmaster repeated slowly. Humans hunted apex predators. Well, yeah, Taesung said. I mean, they were dangerous to livestock and sometimes to people. So humans hunted them. But then we realized we were hunting them too much and they might go extinct. So we stopped and started trying to help them recover. The instructors looked at each other. Velmar's antennae were trembling again. Let me understand this correctly, the headmaster said, its voice very careful. Humans who are physically weaker than most apex predators on your world hunted those predators so effectively that you nearly drove them to extinction. And then you stopped because you felt bad about it. That's basically it, yes, Hyunwoo confirmed. How? The Avicene instructor asked, her voice almost a whisper. How did you hunt them? Different ways for different animals, G1 said. Traps, weapons, tracking. Humans are really good at endurance. We can run for hours. Most animals have to stop and rest, but humans can just keep going. We call it persistence hunting. You just follow the prey until it's too exhausted to run anymore. The bear-like instructor made a sound that the translators could not process. You chase predators until they collapse from exhaustion? Velmar said, his voice hollow. We used to, Taesung said. Ancient humans did that. Modern humans have better methods. Rifles and stuff. But yeah, originally that was one technique. Tell them about wolves, Hyunwoo said quietly. Oh right, Jiwon said. Wolves are interesting. They used to hunt humans sometimes, thousands of years ago. But then humans domesticated some of them. Now we call them dogs and they're our companions. We turned an apex predator into our best friend. The headmaster's crystalline structure seemed to pulse with inner light. You domesticated an apex predator. Well, it took thousands of years, Taesung said. And selective breeding. But yes, the glowing particle instructor floated closer. On my world, there is an apex predator. It has existed for millions of years. Every species on my planet fears it. We have only survived by living in areas where it cannot reach. The idea of hunting it is... The particle swirled in agitation. It is unthinkable. What kind of predator? Taesung asked with immediate interest. No, Velmar said sharply. No, you are not going to ask about its weaknesses and how to track it. That is exactly the behavior that concerns us. The three humans looked genuinely confused. But understanding predators is how you survive them, Jiwan said. For prey, understanding means knowing how to hide or flee, the Avicene instructor explained, speaking slowly as if to children. You do not sound like prey. You sound like hunters discussing your next target. We're not hunters, Taesung protested. We're just students learning survival skills. You think like hunters, the headmaster said. You analyze threats the way a predator analyzes prey. When faced with danger, your instinct is not to flee. It is to understand, to adapt, to overcome. Is that wrong? Hyunwoo asked. The crystalline being seemed to consider this. Not wrong, but concerning. Tell me, humans, On your world, what sits at the top of the food chain? What is Earth's apex predator? The three humans looked at each other again. Humans, Ji-won said quietly. Humans are the apex predator on Earth. And what hunts humans? Velmar asked. Nothing, Hyunwoo said. Not anymore. Not for thousands of years. The silence that followed was heavy. The instructors looked at the three young humans sitting before them, and something in their gazes had changed. It was not fear exactly, but a kind of wary respect, like recognizing another predator in the wild. Nothing hunts you, the headmaster said softly. On a world full of apex predators, humans became the only creature that nothing dares to hunt. And when I asked how you survived these predators, you told me you hunted them instead. Then you felt mercy and chose to save them. That is the truly frightening part, Velmar said. Not that you can hunt apex predators, but that you chose to stop, that you are capable of such violence but restrain yourselves. The three humans sat in uncomfortable silence, finally beginning to understand how the galaxy saw them. We are not monsters, Ji-won said firmly. We make mistakes, but we try to do better. That is all we have ever done. The headmaster's light pulsed again, softer this time. No, you are not monsters. But you are apex predators who learned conscience, and the galaxy has never encountered such a thing before. The emergency council meeting lasted 3 days. Representatives from every species on the Academy's board attended either in person or through holographic transmission. The three human students were not allowed to attend, but they knew they were being discussed. During those 3 days, Taesung, Ji-won, and Hyunwoo continued their other classes. But everything had changed. Students gave them space in the hallways. Some looked frightened. Others seemed curious, studying the humans from a safe distance. On the 3rd day, the humans were called to the council chambers. The room was enormous, designed to accommodate representatives from species of vastly different sizes. The headmaster stood at the center, its crystalline form reflecting the faces of dozens of alien beings arranged in a circle around them. Students of Earth, the headmaster began, its voice echoing through the space. This council has debated what your presence means for the Academy and for the wider galaxy. Some have argued that you should be expelled, that apex predators have no place in an institution of learning. Others believe you should be studied, observed, perhaps contained. Ji-won's hands clenched at her sides, but she said nothing. However, the headmaster continued, we have reached a different conclusion. One representative in particular helped us understand something important. Velmar stepped forward from the circle. The instructor's antennae were no longer flat with stress. They stood upright and his posture seemed more confident. I was afraid, Velmar said, addressing the humans directly. When I saw how you approached the simulation, when I understood what you were, I was afraid. My species are not predators. We evolved from scavengers. The idea of confronting an apex predator instead of fleeing is foreign to everything in my nature. He paused, his multiple eyes focusing on each human in turn. But then I realized something. In all my years teaching survival skills, I have taught students how to run. I have taught them how to hide. I have never taught them how to think like a predator thinks because I cannot. I do not have that instinct. But you do. What are you saying? Taesung asked carefully. That fear has value, Velmar replied. But so does understanding. Many species in the galaxy will only ever be prey, but perhaps they can learn from those who are not. Perhaps there is survival knowledge that only apex predators can teach. A small figure stepped forward from the circle. It was Pip, the rabbit-like Fenrin student who had fled from the classroom days before. He approached the humans on shaking legs, his large ears twitching nervously. I was terrified of you, Pip said, his small voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. When I realized what you were, I wanted you to leave. I thought you would hurt us. We would never, Ji-won started, but Pip held up a tiny paw. I know, he said, because I spent the last 3 days learning about humans, about your history. You fight wars against each other. You can be violent and cruel, but you also build hospitals. You write music. You care for sick animals you will never meet. You are predators who chose to be more than your nature demands. Tears were forming in Pip's large eyes. My world has an apex predator that has hunted my species for millions of years. We have no defense except to run and hide. We lose thousands every year. And I thought, what if we did not just run? What if we could think the way predators think? Not to become violent, but to survive better? The headmaster's light pulsed with what might have been approval. This council has decided that the 3 human students will not be expelled. Instead, you will become teachers. Teachers? Hyunwoo said, surprised. We're students. We're still learning. You will continue your studies, the headmaster said, but you will also instruct a new class, one that we believe is needed. You will teach other students how to think tactically when facing danger, how to understand predators not just as forces of nature, but as opponents who can be outmaneuvered. But we're not experts, Taesung protested. We just know what works on Earth. That is more than anyone else here knows, Velmar said. I can teach students to run. You can teach them to survive even when running is not enough. The council voted unanimously. The decision was made. 6 months passed. The new class was called Advanced Predator Psychology, though some students privately called it Thinking Like a Human. It was offered as an optional course, but the enrollment was overwhelming. Students from every species wanted to learn. Taesung stood at the front of a classroom very different from the one where this had all begun. This room was larger, equipped with advanced simulation equipment. Behind him, Jiwon and Hyunwoo prepared materials for the day's lesson. The students who entered were a mix of species. Some were naturally timid like Pip, who had been one of the first to enroll. Others were curious, wanting to understand this new perspective. Even Dax attended, his forearms folded as he waited for the class to begin. Velmar sat in the back row, no longer an instructor but a student. He had requested permission to attend every session, claiming he had been teaching survival incorrectly for years. Good morning, Taesung said, and the translator carried his words to every species-specific audio receptor in the room. Today we are going to talk about the Rakthari. You all know it as an apex predator to be avoided, but today we are going to learn about its hunting patterns, its territorial behavior, and its weaknesses. A few students shifted nervously, but they did not leave. The goal is not to hunt the Rakthari, Jiwon clarified, standing beside Taesung. The goal is to understand it so completely that you can predict its behavior. Because the more you understand, the better you can survive. Hyunwoo activated a holographic display. We will analyze 3 recorded Rakthari encounters from the Galactic database. In each case, the victims survived. We want to understand why they survived and what they did right. The class lasted 2 hours. The students asked questions, participated in discussions, and worked through tactical scenarios. By the end, even Pip was suggesting strategies that combined his species' natural speed with the environmental awareness that humans had taught. When the class ended and the students filed out, Velmar approached the 3 humans. That was remarkable, the instructor said. You are teaching them to face their fears by understanding them. That is all we know how to do, Jiwon said with a small smile. It is enough, Velmar replied. Later that evening, the 3 humans sat together in their shared quarters, looking out at the stars beyond the station. Do you think we are doing the right thing? Hyunwoo asked quietly. Teaching other species to think like predators? We are teaching them to think like survivors, Taesung corrected. There is a difference. Is there? Jiwon wondered aloud. The line seems thin sometimes. They sat in silence for a moment, considering the weight of what they had become. Teachers, representatives of humanity, examples of what it meant to be an apex predator who chose restraint. I think the difference is choice, Hyunwoo said finally. A predator hunts because it must. We teach survival because we can choose to help. That is what makes us different. Not our strength or our tactics, but our ability to choose mercy. Pip told me something today, Taesung said. He said that before this class he had nightmares about the predators on his world. But now he dreams about going home and teaching his people how to be safe. We gave him hope. Then we are doing the right thing, Jiwon said firmly. A new semester began the following month. The Advanced Predator Psychology class expanded, requiring a larger classroom. Students who had completed the course reported feeling more confident, more capable. Some even went home and taught their families what they had learned. Other academies across the galaxy heard about the program. Some were skeptical. Others wanted to create similar courses. Humanity was becoming known not just for their technological achievements or their strange biology, but for their unique understanding of survival. And in classrooms across Station Harmony, when instructors taught students about fleeing apex predators, they began their lessons differently now. Before we discuss escape protocols, they would say, we must first understand what we are facing. Because the more we understand, the better we survive. This lesson comes from humanity, who faced more apex predators than any species in known space, and learned to coexist with them. Then, inevitably, a human student would raise their hand, and the question would be the same one that had started everything. Which kind? But now, when that question was asked, instructors smiled instead of tensing, because they understood what the galaxy was still learning. The most dangerous predator was not the one with the sharpest claws or the fastest speed. It was the one that learned to think, to choose, and to teach. The one that became an apex predator not through violence but through understanding. Humanity had brought something new to the galaxy. Not fear, but a different kind of strength. The strength to face danger with clear eyes and steady hands. The strength to be capable of violence but to choose peace. The strength to be apex predators who decided that protecting others was more important than asserting dominance. And in the end, that was the lesson that mattered most. Not how to flee an apex predator, but how to be one and still remain human. When the class returned from break, the room had changed. The desks had been moved to the sides, creating a large open space in the center. A new holographic projector sat in the middle of the floor, larger and more complex than the one used for presentations. Velmar stood near the projector, his body language different somehow. The humans had learned to read some alien expressions over their months at the academy, and the instructor seemed tense. "We will now move to practical demonstrations," Velmar announced. "This projector will create a full environmental simulation. You will be placed in a scenario where you encounter an apex predator. Your goal is simple: survive and escape." Several students shuffled nervously. Cress's scales had turned a paler shade of green. Even Dax, with all his strength, looked uncomfortable. "The simulation cannot hurt you," Velmar continued, "but it will feel real. You will experience the environment, the sounds, the presence of the predator. Your performance will be recorded for review." "Which predator will we face?" asked a student named Rina, who had feathers instead of hair. "The Rakthari," Velmar said. "It is a common threat, and represents a standard apex predator encounter. The environment will be a forest similar to those found on Rakthos Prime." The demonstrations began. One by one, students entered the simulation. The rest of the class watched on viewing screens that showed what each student experienced. Rina went first. She appeared in a dense forest with purple trees and thick undergrowth. The moment the Rakthari appeared, she used her natural ability to fly. She launched herself upward into the canopy and escaped quickly. The simulation ended and she emerged looking shaken but successful. Dax was next. Despite his size, he ran with impressive speed when the Rakthari appeared. His forearms helped him push through vegetation, and he used his strength to climb a rocky cliff face that the predator could not follow. He finished breathing hard but safe. One by one, students completed the simulation. Each one used their species' natural advantages. Some climbed, some hid, some used speed or camouflage. All of them followed the same basic pattern: identify the threat, then flee using whatever method their biology provided. Then it was Tae-sung's turn. He stepped into the simulation zone, and the holographic environment materialized around him. The viewing screens showed his perspective. He stood in the purple forest, alien plants surrounding him on all sides. The air was thick and humid, and strange calls echoed from unseen creatures. Tae-sung looked around slowly, turning in a complete circle. He bent down and picked up a fallen branch, testing its weight by bouncing it in his hand. Then he found a stone about the size of his fist and put it in his pocket. "What is he doing?" Cress whispered to the student next to him. On the screen, the Rakthari appeared. It stepped out from behind a massive tree trunk, its black armor gleaming, its claws scraping against the ground. The creature was enormous, easily the size described in the lecture. Tae-sung saw it immediately. He did not scream or run. Instead, he watched it for several seconds, his body very still. His eyes moved, tracking the way the Rakthari shifted its weight, how its head moved as it focused on him. The Rakthari charged. Tae-sung moved, but he did not run directly away. He angled to the side, putting a large tree between himself and the predator. When the Rakthari adjusted its course, Tae-sung threw the stone he had picked up. It hit the creature in the face, not hard enough to hurt it, but enough to make it flinch and slow down. Using that moment, Tae-sung ran. But his path was strange. He did not run in a straight line away from the predator. Instead, he circled, keeping trees between himself and the Rakthari. He moved toward a sound of running water, using the terrain to break line of sight repeatedly. When he reached a stream, he ran through it for several meters, then climbed onto a fallen log and jumped to the opposite bank. He grabbed a handful of mud and smeared it on his arms and face, then continued moving parallel to the water. The Rakthari followed, but it seemed confused. It stopped at the stream, its head lowering as it sniffed the water. It paced back and forth trying to pick up the scent trail. Tae-sung had moved behind the creature now, circling around to get to higher ground. He never turned his back completely on the predator. Even as he retreated, he kept glancing over his shoulder, watching its movements. "Stop simulation," Velmar said suddenly. The forest disappeared, and Tae-sung stood in the empty classroom once again, still holding the branch he had picked up. "Why did you stop it?" Tae-sung asked. "I was about to reach that ridge. The Rakthari wouldn't have been able to track me from there." Velmar approached slowly. "You were supposed to flee. I did flee. I got away from it." "No," the instructor said, his voice strained. "You did not flee. You engaged in, I do not even know what to call it. Tactical retreat? You studied it. You used tools. You confused its tracking. You moved behind it." Tae-sung looked confused. "Right. That's how you escape a predator when you can't outrun it. You make it hard to track you, and you control the encounter so it can't ambush you again." "You were supposed to run," Velmar repeated. "I'm not fast enough to outrun a Rakthari," Tae-sung said reasonably. "You said it can run 40 miles per hour. Humans can only run about 15 miles per hour in short bursts, and we're not built for sprinting, so I had to be smarter about it." The classroom was completely silent. Every student was staring at Tae-sung. "Ji-won," Velmar said quietly. "Please enter the simulation." Ji-won stood up and walked into the simulation zone. The forest appeared around her again, reset to its starting position. When the Rakthari appeared this time, Ji-won's reaction was immediate. She jumped and grabbed a low tree branch, then pulled herself up. But instead of just climbing to safety like Rinna had done, Ji-won moved through the canopy. She broke several small branches and threw them in different directions, creating noise and movement in multiple locations. The Rakthari below followed the sounds, its head swinging back and forth, confused about which direction its prey had gone. While it was distracted, Ji-won climbed higher and then moved horizontally, using the connected branches to travel far from her starting position. She moved quietly now, placing each hand and foot carefully. By the time the Rakthari realized the falling branches were a trick, she was 50 meters away and moving along the tree line toward rougher terrain where the trees grew thicker. "Stop simulation," Velmar said. Ji-won dropped lightly to the classroom floor. "Was that wrong too?" she asked, seeing the instructor's expression. "You used deception," Velmar said. "You created false trails to confuse the predator while you escaped." "Yes," Ji-won agreed. "Otherwise it might have just waited at the base of the tree. Some predators do that. They can wait longer than you can stay in a tree." "Hyunwoo," Velmar called. "Your turn." The quiet human stood and entered the simulation. This time, everyone watched with intense focus. When Hyunwoo appeared in the forest, he did something none of the other students had done. He immediately scanned the entire environment, his head moving in quick, precise movements. Within 3 seconds, he had identified multiple possible escape routes. When the Rakthari appeared, Hyunwoo ran. But his path was calculated. He ran in a zigzag pattern, never in a straight line. As he ran, he grabbed small objects, stones, sticks, handfuls of dirt, and threw them behind him without looking. The objects did not hit the Rakthari, but they clattered and bounced, creating noise that masked his footsteps. He led the creature toward an area where the trees grew close together, too close for the Rakthari's large body to move easily. Then Hyunwoo slipped between two trunks that were barely wide enough for his human frame. The Rakthari tried to follow but got stuck for a moment, thrashing and breaking branches. By the time it freed itself, Hyunwoo had climbed onto a rocky outcrop and was moving along a narrow ledge that would not support the Rakthari's weight. "Stop simulation." Hyunwoo returned to the classroom floor, breathing harder than the other two but not exhausted. Velmar stood in the center of the room looking at the three humans. His antennae were completely flat against his head, a sign of extreme stress. "You do not flee like prey," he said slowly. "None of you do. You retreat like something that knows how to hunt." Kress finished, his voice shaking. The three humans looked at each other, then at their classmates. Everyone was staring at them with fear or confusion or both. "We're not trying to hunt the Rakthari," Taesung said, holding up his hands. "We're just trying to survive." "That is not survival behavior," Velmar said. "That is combat behavior. Tactical thinking. You treat the predator not as a force of nature to escape, but as an opponent to outmaneuver. Is there a difference?" Ji-Wan asked honestly. And that question hung in the air, unanswered, as the class realized that something fundamental separated humans from every other species in the room. The demonstration was over, but a much larger revelation was just beginning.